The flight attendant meets her millionaire ex-husband on a flight without realizing he would be the pilot. Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Sofia Martinez stared at her reflection in the cramped bathroom mirror of her Brooklyn apartment. Dark circles framed her eyes, despite the concealer she'd meticulously applied at 4:30 in the morning. The life of a flight attendant wasn't glamorous, but it had been her salvation. 5 years, she whispered to herself, adjusting her navy uniform scarf with practiced precision. 5 years, and I'm finally okay. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Sophia glanced at the screen and groaned. Crew reassignment. Flight UA 847, JFK to SFO, premium service, report time, 6:30 a.m. She'd been scheduled for a routine flight to Chicago, but the airline's last-minute shuffle meant she'd be working premium service. Longer flight, more demanding passengers, but better tips. The timing couldn't have been worse. Today marked exactly 5 years since her divorce was finalized, and she'd planned to be back in New York by evening for drinks with friends who'd promised to help her celebrate her independence anniversary. Her apartment buzzer rang. The Uber had arrived 15 minutes early, adding unnecessary pressure to her already rushed morning routine. "Coming!" she called out to no one, grabbing her roller bag and crew tote. As she locked her apartment door, her neighbor, Mrs. Finkelstein, peeked out. "Another early one, dear?" the elderly woman asked, her white hair set in perfect curlers despite the early hour. "Unexpected schedule change," Sophia replied with a tired smile. "San Francisco today." "Well, that's nice." "Much better views than Chicago," Mrs. Finkelstein said. "Maybe you'll meet a handsome tech millionaire out there." Sophia forced a laugh. "The last millionaire in my life was enough for several lifetimes, thanks." The thought of her ex-husband, James, still provoked a complex mixture of emotions she preferred not to examine. The wealthy tech entrepreneur had swept her off her feet 7 years ago, married her after a whirlwind romance, then gradually revealed himself to be absorbed in his work to the exclusion of everything else, including their marriage. Or at least, that was the story she told herself. The reality was messier, filled with miscommunications, unspoken expectations, and two people who'd loved each other but couldn't find a way to make it work. The Uber ride to JFK passed in a blur of early morning traffic and memories she thought she'd successfully buried. James Cooper gripped the leather-bound logbook in his hand, still not quite believing he'd made it. At 42, he was significantly older than most newly minted commercial pilots, but his lifelong passion for aviation had finally overcome the practical business sense that had made him millions. "Captain Reynolds wants to see you before pre-flight," said one of the gate agents as James strode through the terminal, his pilot's uniform still stiff with newness. James nodded, adjusting his cap. 5 years ago, flying had been just a hobby. Expensive private lessons squeezed between business meetings. Now it was his life. His tech company had been acquired for a sum that meant he never needed to work again, but idleness had never suited him. "Cooper!" Captain Reynolds' booming voice carried across the crew room. "Got a minute?" The veteran pilot was reviewing flight plans at a small table, his silver hair and weathered face testifying to decades in the cockpit. "Morning, sir," James replied, taking the seat across from him. "So, first time as first officer on a premium cross-country route," Reynolds said, studying him. "Nervous?" James straightened his shoulders. "Prepared, sir, not nervous." Reynolds laughed. "Liar! Everyone's nervous, but you've got the hours and the skills, even if you came to it later than most." He pushed a folder across the table. "Passenger manifest, full flight, several VIPs in first class, including some tech CEO who'll probably want to tell you how to fly the plane better." James smiled. He'd been that guy once. "Also, we've had a crew change. New lead flight attendant, someone just transferred from Chicago routes. Martinez, I think. Hope she's good with the premium crowd." James froze, his hand hovering over the manifest. "Martinez?" Sophia Martinez? Reynolds looked up from his papers. You know her? I used to. James quickly composed himself. We worked together years ago. Different airline. It wasn't technically a lie. They had worked together briefly. She'd been a flight attendant, and he'd been a frequent first-class passenger before they started dating. Before everything. Well, great. Already established rapport with the crew. That'll make things smoother, Reynolds said, completely missing the tension that had suddenly seized James's body. We board in 40 minutes. I need you on the walkthrough in 20. James nodded mechanically, his mind racing. Sophia here, today of all days. It had been 5 years since the divorce, 5 years since she'd looked at him with such disappointment and said, "You built an empire but couldn't build a marriage." 5 years of him rebuilding his life around a childhood dream she'd never taken seriously. Or had she? There had been so much left unsaid between them. He straightened his uniform and headed for the gate. The professional thing would be to request a reassignment, cite personal conflict. The smart thing would be to avoid the awkwardness altogether. But James Cooper had never been known for doing the expected thing, and some small, possibly masochistic part of him needed to see her face again. The premium service cabin buzzed with pre-flight activity as Sophia directed her crew through their preparations. 2 junior flight attendants, Blake and Aisha, were stocking the galley while she reviewed the passenger manifest. We've got 3 gluten allergies, 1 vegan and... Sophia trailed off as she scanned the first-class passenger list. A familiar name jumped out at her. No way. Problem? Aisha asked, looking up from the champagne she was arranging. James Cooper, Sophia said, her voice hollow. He's in first class. The James Cooper. Blake's eyes widened. The tech guy who sold his company for like $1 billion and then disappeared from Silicon Valley. That's a big deal. Not $1 billion, Sophia muttered. Just a few $100 million. She knew the exact figure, had declined her share in the divorce settlement out of pride and a desperate need for a clean break. You know him? Aisha asked. I was married to him, Sophia replied, then immediately regretted the admission as both junior attendants stared at her with matching expressions of shock. You were married to James Cooper? Blake whispered. The James Cooper who developed that security algorithm that every bank in America uses. And divorced him, Sophia added, forcing a professional smile. So today should be interesting. I need to check something with the gate agent. Excuse me. She needed air, space, a moment to process this cruel coincidence. Of all the flights in all the world, James Cooper had to be on hers. Today. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. At the gate desk, Sophia tried to steady her breathing. Sarah, I need a favor. Is there any way to switch me to another flight? Any flight? The gate agent looked up in surprise. Sophia, we're boarding in 15 minutes. Is everything okay? Personal conflict with a passenger. It's complicated. Sarah shook her head. I'm sorry, we're already short-staffed. Captain Reynolds specifically requested an experienced lead for this flight. There's no one to replace you this late. Who's the captain today? Maybe I can explain. Reynolds is captain. New first officer too. Cooper, I think. Both came over from the Dallas hub. Sophia's stomach dropped. Cooper? James Cooper is the first officer? Sarah checked her screen. No, the passenger Cooper is in first class. Pilot Cooper is, James Cooper. She looked up with a frown. Oh, that's confusing. Same name. It's the same person, Sophia whispered, the reality crashing down around her. James Cooper is not a passenger, he's flying the plane. Sarah's eyes widened. Wait, your ex-husband is the first officer on this flight? And you didn't know? He wasn't a pilot, Sophia said, her mind whirling. He was a tech CEO. He just flew private planes as a hobby. Well, according to this, he's been with the airline for almost 3 years. Certified commercial pilot. Sarah studied Sophia's pale face. This is really bad timing, isn't it? The worst, Sophia agreed, taking a deep breath and straightening her uniform. But I'm a professional. We both are. It'll be fine. The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The cockpit pre-flight check was proceeding smoothly when Captain Reynolds announced, "Lead flight attendant coming in for briefing." James kept his eyes fixed on the instrument panel, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd rehearsed what he might say a dozen times in the last 20 minutes. Casual, professional. "Good to see you, Sophia. It's been a while." The cockpit door opened. "Captain Reynolds, First Officer Cooper, I'm Sophia Martinez, lead flight attendant for today's—" Her voice cut off abruptly as James turned to face her. 5 years had changed her, but not in the ways he might have expected. Her dark hair was shorter now, falling just below her shoulders instead of down her back. Her face was thinner, more defined. But her eyes, those expressive brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love, were now wide with shock. "James?" she whispered. "Hello, Sophia," he replied, amazed at how steady his voice sounded when the rest of him felt like it might shake apart. Captain Reynolds looked between them with dawning comprehension. "You two know each other? Wait, is this the different airline you mentioned, Cooper?" James cleared his throat. "Captain Reynolds, Sophia Martinez is my ex-wife." The captain's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Ex-wife? Christ, Cooper, that's not used to work together. That's a conflict of interest." Former conflict," James said quickly. "It's been 5 years. We're both professionals." Sophia had regained her composure, her face settling into the neutral mask James recognized from their worst arguments, the expression that meant she was walling herself off completely. "It won't be a problem, Captain," she said coolly. "First Officer Cooper and I can certainly manage a 6-hour flight with civility." Reynolds looked deeply skeptical. "If either of you feels this arrangement compromises flight safety—" "It doesn't," they said in unison, then glanced at each other in surprise. Reynolds sighed. "Fine, but I expect absolute professionalism. Martinez, standard briefing, please." Sophia launched into the safety briefing with mechanical precision, never once making direct eye contact with James again. When she finished, Reynolds dismissed her with a nod. As she turned to leave, James couldn't help himself. "Sophia, Good flight, gentlemen," she interrupted, and closed the cockpit door firmly behind her. James turned back to the controls, aware of Reynolds watching him carefully. "You want to tell me what that was about?" the captain asked. "Ancient history," James replied. "Nothing that affects this flight." Reynolds studied him for a long moment. "I've been flying for 32 years, son. I've seen divorces, affairs, and everything in between at 35,000 feet. Nothing stays ancient history in a metal tube in the sky. Best be prepared for turbulence that won't show up on the weather radar." James nodded, focusing intently on the pre-flight checklist. The captain was right, but he'd faced worse challenges than spending 6 hours in proximity to Sophia Martinez, hadn't he? Boarding was nearly complete when Sophia felt a tap on her shoulder. Blake was looking at her with undisguised curiosity. "So, your ex-husband is flying the plane," he whispered. "Co-piloting," Sophia corrected. "And yes, it's not a big deal." "Not a big deal." Blake's voice rose slightly. "It's like the plot of a movie. The handsome millionaire pilot and his flight attendant ex-wife trapped together at 35,000 feet. Sophia shot him a warning look. "It's nothing like a movie. It's awkward and unprofessional, and we're both going to pretend it's not happening. Now, please check that all carry-ons are properly stowed in rows 20 through 25. As Blake moved away, Sophia busied herself helping an elderly woman find her seat, grateful for the distraction of work. But her mind kept returning to the shock of seeing James in the cockpit, a pilot. He'd actually done it. All those times he'd talked about learning to fly commercially someday. She'd assumed it was just another hobby he'd discard when the novelty wore off. She'd never imagined he'd actually follow through, especially not after achieving such success in tech. The final boarding announcement came over the PA system, and Sophia moved toward the front of the plane for the safety demonstration. As she passed the cockpit, the door was open for final pre-flight checks. James was focused on the controls, his profile achingly familiar, yet somehow new in the context of the cockpit. He looked up suddenly, catching her gaze. For a brief moment, something electric passed between them, recognition, surprise, and something else she couldn't name. Then the moment passed, and they both returned to their duties. Professionals. Just two professionals doing their jobs. The plane pushed back from the gate, and Sophia settled into her jump seat for takeoff. Through the cabin window, she could see the morning sun illuminating the skyline of New York, the city where she'd rebuilt her life from the ashes of her marriage. And now, in a cosmic joke worthy of the universe's cruelest comedian, she was literally flying away from that hard-won independence with the very man she'd fought so hard to leave behind. As the engines roared to life and the aircraft began its ascent, Sophia closed her eyes. It was going to be a very long flight to San Francisco. 3 hours into the flight, Sophia had successfully avoided any direct interaction with the cockpit. Captain Reynolds had made all announcements and the junior attendants had handled the meal service for the pilots. "Sophia," Aisha whispered, approaching her in the galley, "Captain Reynolds requested you personally bring First Officer Cooper his lunch." Sophia froze. "Why me specifically?" "He said something about needing to discuss the approach into SFO with you since you've flown that route more recently than they have." With a resigned sigh, Sophia prepared the meal tray. She couldn't avoid this forever. James was alone in the cockpit when she entered, Reynolds having stepped out for a brief break. "Your lunch," she said formally, placing the tray beside him. "Thank you." He glanced up, his blue eyes meeting hers. "Sophia, we should probably talk about—" A violent shudder ran through the aircraft, cutting him off mid-sentence. The plane dropped suddenly, causing Sophia to stumble forward. James instinctively reached out, catching her before she fell against the instrument panel. For one breathless moment, she was pressed against him, his hands steady on her waist. 5 years vanished in an instant. The seatbelt sign chimed as Captain Reynolds' voice came through the headset. "Cooper, we've got unexpected turbulence. I'm on my way back." James released her immediately, turning to the controls. "Understood, Captain." Sophia steadied herself. "I should secure the cabin," he finished, already focused on adjusting their altitude. "I know." She hurried out, their moment of connection broken by duty. The turbulence intensified over the next 30 minutes. In first class, a CEO was becoming increasingly agitated. "This is unacceptable," he complained loudly. "I have a meeting in San Francisco that can't be delayed." "I assure you the pilots are doing everything they can," Sophia replied calmly. "Well, it's not good enough. Don't you know who I am?" Before she could respond, the intercom crackled. To her surprise, it was James's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is First Officer Cooper. We're experiencing some unexpected weather patterns, but have requested a slight route adjustment that should smooth things out shortly. I know turbulence can be concerning, but I promise you," his voice seemed to soften slightly, "sometimes the bumpiest journeys lead to the smoothest landings." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. It was almost exactly what he'd said to her on their 3rd date, when she'd confessed her fears about falling in love again. The demanding passenger seemed mollified by the explanation. "At least someone up there knows what they're doing," he muttered. "Yes," Sophia replied quietly. "He always did." During a brief lull in service, Sophia found herself cornered by Blake and Aisha in the rear galley. "Okay, spill," Blake insisted. "What happened between you two?" Sophia sighed. "Classic story. Met on a flight. Whirlwind romance. Marriage. Then his company took off. He worked 80-hour weeks, and I got tired of being married to someone who was never there. And now he's a pilot," Aisha observed. "Talk about a career change." "It was always his dream," Sophia admitted reluctantly. "I just never thought he'd actually do it." "Maybe he had something to prove," Blake suggested. "To you." "That's ridiculous," Sophia scoffed. "He didn't become a pilot for me." But a small voice in her head whispered, "Didn't he?" As they began descent into San Francisco, Captain Reynolds called Sophia to the cockpit again. "Martinez, we may have a medical situation in row 15. Passenger complaining of chest pain." Sophia immediately switched to emergency mode, all personal feelings set aside. James watched her efficient response with admiration. She'd always been exceptional in a crisis. It was one of the countless things he'd loved about her. As she turned to leave, he said quietly, "Sophia, when we land, I have a medical emergency to handle, First Officer." She cut him off professionally. "Any personal matters will have to wait." The cockpit door closed behind her with a decisive click. James turned back to the controls, focusing on the approaching California coastline. He'd waited 5 years. He could wait a few more hours. Besides, they still had the return flight to New York tomorrow. The San Francisco layover meant a 24-hour break before the return flight to New York. After handling the medical emergency, thankfully just indigestion, not a heart attack, Sophia retreated to her hotel room, determined to avoid any chance encounters with James. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I got your number from crew scheduling. Can we talk? Lobby bar, 8 p.m., James." She stared at the message for a full minute before responding. "Professional matters only." His reply was immediate. Of course. The hotel bar was dimly lit and relatively quiet when Sophia arrived precisely at 8. James sat at a corner table, still in his uniform pants, but with a casual shirt replacing the pilot's jacket. "Thank you for coming," he said, as she took the seat across from him. "You mentioned professional matters," she replied coolly. James studied her face. 5 years looks good on you. That's not a professional comment. He smiled slightly. "You're right. Sorry." He took a breath. "The real reason I asked you here is to apologize for the surprise today. I had no idea you'd be on the flight." "Likewise," she admitted. "When did you start flying commercially?" 3 years ago. After the acquisition, I needed direction." A waiter approached, and they both ordered. White wine for her, club soda for him. "Still don't drink before flight days," she observed. "Some habits stick," he acknowledged. "Sophia, I know you didn't want to see me again, but since we're here, I've wanted to tell you that you were right." She blinked in surprise. "About?" "Everything. I built a company but couldn't build a marriage. We prioritized all the wrong things." He leaned forward slightly. "The day you left was the day I finally understood what mattered." Sophia felt her carefully constructed walls wavering. "James, you once told me I'd never follow through on flying commercially, that it was just another distraction." His eyes held hers. "I wanted to prove I could commit to something meaningful." "So you became a pilot to prove me wrong?" she asked incredulously. "No," he said quietly. "I became a pilot to prove you right. You always saw who I really was, better than I did myself." The weight of his words hung between them. "Why didn't you ever reach out?" she finally asked. "You made it clear you wanted a clean break. I respected that." He hesitated. "But seeing you today, maybe the universe had other ideas." Their drinks arrived, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. "What about you?" he asked. "Are you happy, Sophia?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm content. Built a life that's mine. It's enough." Something flickered in his eyes. "Is it?" Before she could answer, her phone rang. Blake was having an issue with tomorrow's flight manifest. As she took the call, James signaled for the check. "Duty calls," she said apologetically after hanging up. "Always does," he replied with a sad smile. "I should review flight plans anyway." As they stood to leave, he added, "For what it's worth, I'm glad it was your flight today." Sophia hesitated, then admitted, "It was less terrible than I expected." His laugh was warm and familiar. High praise indeed. In the elevator, standing side by side in silence, Sophia found herself wondering what might have been if they'd both understood 5 years ago what they seemed to grasp now. The doors opened at her floor. "Good night, First Officer Cooper," she said formally. "Good night, Lead Attendant Martinez," he replied, but his eyes said much more. As the elevator doors closed between them, Sophia leaned against the wall, her heart racing with emotions she'd thought long buried. Tomorrow's flight suddenly seemed very complicated indeed. The crew assembled in the hotel lobby at 6 a.m. for the return flight to New York. Despite her best efforts to appear rested, Sophia had barely slept, her mind replaying the conversation with James. Captain Reynolds studied his crew with shrewd eyes. "Everyone ready for the return leg? Any issues I should know about?" His gaze lingered on Sophia and James, who stood carefully on opposite sides of the group. "No issues, Captain," Sophia replied professionally. James simply nodded in agreement. "Good," Reynolds said, though he looked unconvinced. "Because we've got a full flight, and weather reports show potential storm systems over the Midwest." Boarding proceeded smoothly until a commotion erupted in first class. A well-dressed businessman was arguing loudly with Aisha. "I specifically requested 2A, not 2C. Sophia intervened quickly. "Sir, I apologize for the confusion. Let me check your reservation." The man glared. "Do you know who I am? I'm Victor Harrington, CEO of Pinnacle Technologies." Sophia maintained her professional smile while checking his ticket. "Mr. Harrington, it appears there was a system error. Let me see what we can do." Behind her, Blake whispered, "That's the guy who bought James's company, the one who made him a millionaire." Sophia froze momentarily, then composed herself. "Mr. Harrington, if you'll give me a moment, I'll speak with the gate agent." As she turned, she nearly collided with James, who had emerged from the cockpit for the pre-flight check. "Problem?" he asked, his voice neutral despite the tension evident in his shoulders. "Seat assignment issue," she replied quietly, "with Victor Harrington." James's expression tightened. "Ah, Victor. You know him?" she asked, though the answer was obvious. "He bought my company," James replied. "Not my biggest fan since I left tech entirely." He hesitated. "Want me to speak with him?" "That's not necessary, First Officer," Sophia said formally, aware of Harrington watching them. "I can handle it." James nodded, but as he turned back toward the cockpit, he whispered, "He always gets the window seat." A negotiation tactic of his. Armed with this insight, Sophia returned to Harrington. "Mr. Harrington, we can move another passenger to accommodate your preference for a window seat." Harrington looked surprised, then pleased. "Well, at least someone on this flight knows how to provide proper service." Crisis averted, Sophia caught James's eye as he completed his exterior check. He offered a small conspiratorial smile that sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. 2 hours into the flight, the predicted storms materialized. The aircraft bucked and swayed through rough air, the seatbelt sign remaining illuminated as passengers grew increasingly anxious. In the galley, Aisha looked pale. "This is worse than yesterday." "Standard summer weather patterns," Sophia assured her, though privately she was concerned about the intensity of the turbulence. The intercom crackled. "Lead attendant to the cockpit, please." Sophia made her way forward, bracing against the seatbacks as the plane continued to shake. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds looked grim, while James was focused intently on the navigation displays. "We need to divert," Reynolds announced without preamble. "Severe storm cell ahead, and Denver is reporting ground stops. Kansas City looks like our best option." "How long will we be on the ground?" Sophia asked, mentally calculating the cascade of scheduling issues this would create. "Uncertain," James replied, his voice steady despite the tension. "Weather system is moving slowly. Could be an hour, could be overnight." Reynolds nodded. "I need you to prepare the cabin, Martinez. And," he added with a meaningful look, "given the passenger manifest, we might have some unhappy VIPs." "Understood," Sophia replied. As she turned to leave, the plane dropped suddenly, causing her to lose her balance. James reached out instinctively, his hand catching her arm to steady her. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, a moment of perfect understanding amid the chaos. "Thanks," she murmured. "Always," he replied softly. The announcement about the diversion went about as well as expected. Victor Harrington was particularly vocal in his displeasure. "This is completely unacceptable," he declared loudly. "I have a board meeting tomorrow morning." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Harrington," Sophia said calmly. Our pilots are making this decision for everyone's safety. Your pilots? He scoffed. I bet it's that Cooper making these calls. Always was too cautious for his own good. It's why I had to push him out after the acquisition. Sophia stiffened at the mischaracterization. First Officer Cooper is following standard safety protocols, sir. Harrington's eyes narrowed. You know him. Before she could respond, the plane lurched violently. Lightning flashed outside the windows, illuminating the dark clouds surrounding them. The cabin fell silent, Harrington's complaints forgotten as the reality of the weather became apparent. Over the PA system, James's voice remained remarkably calm. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Kansas City. We'll be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. There was a subtle confidence in his tone that Sophia recognized, the same steady assurance he'd once used to convince nervous investors that his unproven startup was worth millions. She'd forgotten how compelling that quiet certainty could be. Kansas City International Airport was chaotic with diverted flights. The crew huddled near the gate as Captain Reynolds delivered the bad news. Weather's not clearing until morning. We're grounded overnight. Groans erupted from the assembled flight attendants. I've arranged hotel rooms, Reynolds continued. Martinez, I need you and Cooper to handle passenger communications while I coordinate with dispatch. Sophia glanced at James, who nodded professionally. We've got it, Captain. They worked side by side for the next hour, arranging accommodations, rebooking connections, and calming frustrated travelers. Despite the years apart, they fell into a natural rhythm, anticipating each other's needs and complementing each other's approaches. When Harrington approached with yet another complaint, James stepped forward. Victor, he greeted his former business associate, I understand you're concerned about your meeting. I've arranged for a private conference room at the airport hotel so you can conduct it virtually if necessary. Harrington seemed taken aback by the gesture. Well, that's acceptable, I suppose. He glanced between James and Sophia with sudden interest. You two work well together, almost like you've known each other a long time. Ms. Martinez is an exceptional lead attendant, James replied smoothly. The airline is fortunate to have her. After Harrington walked away, Sophia raised an eyebrow. Laying it on a bit thick, weren't you? James shrugged. He responds to flattery and solutions, not apologies. Some things you never forget about people. He paused. Like how you always twist your ring when you're stressed. Sophia looked down, suddenly aware she'd been fidgeting with her right hand. The ring, a simple silver band she'd bought herself on the first anniversary of her divorce, was indeed twisted around her finger. I didn't realize I still did that, she admitted. Some habits stick, he said, echoing his words from the night before, like how I still take my coffee with cinnamon. She couldn't help but smile. You hated cinnamon until I made you try it. I acquired the taste, he acknowledged, one of many things I learned from you. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the busy terminal seemed to fade away around them. The moment was broken by Blake calling out, Sophia, the hotel shuttle is here. James cleared his throat. We should go. Big day tomorrow. Right, she agreed, suddenly awkward. Tomorrow. As they walked toward the exit, maintaining a professional distance, Sophia wondered if Kansas City was just another unexpected detour, or if perhaps they'd been heading here all along. In the hotel lobby, Captain Reynolds handed out room keys. Unfortunately, with all the diversions, they're short on rooms. Some of you will need to double up. He handed the last key to Sophia. Martinez, you're in 614. As the crew dispersed, Sophia headed for the elevators. James stepped in beside her, pressing the button for the 6th floor. You're on 6-2? She asked, surprised. He nodded. 612. The elevator ride passed in awkward silence. When they reached their floor, they walked down the hallway together. Well, this is me, Sophia said, stopping at her door. James continued 2 doors down, then turned with an unreadable expression. Sophia, about yesterday. I meant what I said. Seeing you again, it wasn't just coincidence. It was a second chance to say the things I should have said 5 years ago. Sophia felt her heart racing. "James, I'm not asking for anything," he assured her quickly. "Just wanted you to know that whatever happens after tomorrow's flight, I'm grateful for these 2 days." Before she could respond, his room door opened from within, revealing Blake with a towel wrapped around his head. "Oh, Sophia! James! They got the most amazing shower pressure in here!" James looked as startled as she felt. "You must be my roommate," he said, recovering quickly. Blake grinned. "Captain Reynolds said senior crew should bunk together, though I think he meant you and him." He winked at Sophia. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of your ex for you." "Blake!" Sophia exclaimed, mortified. James just laughed. "I'm sure you will." To Sophia, he added softly, "Good night, Sophia." "Good night," she replied, watching as he disappeared into the room with Blake. Alone in her room, Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, her emotions in turmoil. Outside, lightning still flashed across the sky, the storms that had diverted their flight still raging. It felt oddly appropriate, her internal weather matching the external tumult. After 5 years of calm skies, James Cooper had re-entered her life like an unexpected storm front, disrupting everything. And the strangest part was, she wasn't entirely sure she wanted the skies to clear. Morning in Kansas City dawned clear and bright, the storms of the previous day having moved eastward overnight. Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through her hotel window and a text message from Captain Reynolds. "Crew briefing at 9 a.m. Departure at 11 if weather holds." She'd barely slept, her mind replaying every interaction with James over the past 2 days. 5 years of carefully constructed indifference had crumbled in 48 hours, leaving her confused and vulnerable. At breakfast in the hotel restaurant, she spotted James sitting alone by the window, reading something on his tablet. For a moment, she considered joining him, but Aisha and Blake arrived, chattering excitedly about their unexpected adventure. "Kansas City. I've never been here before," Blake announced, dropping into the chair beside her. "Though all I've seen is the airport and this hotel." "How was your night with the Millionaire pilot?" Aisha asked, with a suggestive smirk. Blake sighed dramatically. "Disappointingly professional. He spent most of the evening reviewing weather patterns on his laptop, though he did ask some questions about you," he added, glancing at Sophia. She nearly choked on her coffee. "What kind of questions?" "Nothing scandalous," Blake assured her. "Just how long you'd been flying this route, if you seemed happy with your transfer from Chicago." He leaned closer. "And if you were seeing anyone." "He did not ask that," Sophia protested, though her heart skipped a beat. "Not in those words," Blake conceded, "but he definitely perked up when I mentioned you'd turned down Greg from gate operations 3 times. Sophia felt her cheeks warm. Across the restaurant, James looked up suddenly, as if sensing their conversation. Their eyes met briefly before she quickly looked away. "It doesn't matter," she insisted. "After today's flight, we'll probably never see each other again." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure if the thought brought relief or regret. At the crew briefing, Captain Reynolds outlined the return plan. "Weather looks good all the way to JFK. We'll have some make-up time to do since we're behind schedule, but winds are favorable." He assigned tasks efficiently, then added, "Cooper, you'll handle the takeoff and landing today." James nodded, his expression professional. Though Sophia detected a flash of pleasure in his eyes, it was a vote of confidence from the senior captain and a chance for James to demonstrate his skills. As the briefing concluded, Reynolds pulled Sophia aside. "Everything squared away between you and Cooper?" "Yes, Captain," she replied automatically. Reynolds studied her face. 32 years of flying, Martinez. I've seen every kind of relationship drama at 35,000 feet. Whatever's happening between you two, just make sure it stays out of the cabin." "Nothing is happening," she insisted. The captain raised a skeptical eyebrow. "If you say so." Boarding was nearly complete when Victor Harrington approached Sophia at the galley. "Ms. Martinez, isn't it? I'd like to apologize for my behavior yesterday." Surprised, Sophia responded carefully. "That's very kind, Mr. Harrington, but completely unnecessary." "No, it is necessary," he insisted. Cooper spoke with me this morning, reminded me that safety should always trump convenience. He glanced toward the cockpit. He mentioned you were once married. Sophia tensed. That's correct. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. Interesting. In all the years I worked with him after the acquisition, he never mentioned his ex-wife was a flight attendant, though he did negotiate quite firmly for pilot training as part of his exit package. Did he? Sophia asked, her curiosity piqued despite herself. Most unusual request I've ever had from a tech executive selling his company, Harrington confirmed. Most want stock options, consulting fees, golden parachutes. Cooper just wanted flying lessons and a recommendation to the commercial training program. He smiled slightly, said something about keeping a promise. Before Sophia could process this information, the final boarding call was announced. Harrington returned to his seat, leaving her with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. From the pilot's seat, James guided the aircraft smoothly into the sky above Kansas City. Beside him, Captain Reynolds monitored the systems with quiet approval. "Nice takeoff, Cooper," the captain commented as they reached cruising altitude. "Very smooth." "Thank you, sir," James replied, feeling the familiar rush of satisfaction that came with flying. No business deal, no technology breakthrough had ever given him the same pure joy as guiding an aircraft through the sky. Well, almost nothing. His mind drifted to Sophia, to her surprised expression when she'd first seen him in the cockpit, to the brief moments when her professional mask had slipped during their conversations, revealing glimpses of the woman he'd once known so well. "Mind on the controls, Cooper," Reynolds said, interrupting his thoughts. "Save the daydreaming for your layover." "Yes, sir," James responded, refocusing on the instrument panel. "Though I was actually calculating our fuel consumption with the tailwind. We might make up more time than expected." Reynolds chuckled. "Sure you were." He checked his watch. "I'll take over. Go stretch your legs. Maybe check on the cabin." The suggestion wasn't subtle, but James appreciated it nonetheless. Midway through the flight, as Sophia was checking on passengers in business class, a gentle hand on her shoulder made her turn. James stood there in his pilot's uniform, looking impossibly handsome and slightly uncertain. "First officer," she acknowledged formally, aware of curious glances from nearby passengers. "Lead attendant," he replied with equal formality. "Captain Reynolds asked me to check on cabin conditions." "Everything's running smoothly," she assured him, "though we're low on the vegetarian meal option." "I see." He maintained the professional pretense for the benefit of listening ears. "May I speak with you privately for a moment, regarding the, meal situation?" Sophia nodded, leading him to the empty galley area. Once they were alone, his professional demeanor softened. "I didn't come to talk about meals," he admitted. "I just wanted to see you." "James," she began, then faltered. "This is complicated." "I know." He took a deep breath. "Sophia, when we land in New York, would you have dinner with me? A real conversation, no interruptions, just us." The request hung between them, weighted with 5 years of silence and 2 days of rediscovery. "I don't know if that's a good idea," she said carefully. "We're different people now." "Exactly," he replied. "That's why we should talk. No expectations, no pressure, just closure, if nothing else." A call light dinged from first class. "I have to go," Sophia said, grateful for the interruption. James nodded. "Think about it, please." As he walked back toward the cockpit, Sophia found herself watching him go, remembering another time when she'd watched him walk away. The day she'd moved out of their home, ending their marriage. That day, she'd felt nothing but relief and a strange emptiness. Today, she felt something dangerously close to hope. As they began their descent into New York, light turbulence buffeted the aircraft. In the cockpit, James adjusted their approach, his movements confident and precise. "JFK Tower, United 847, beginning final approach," he communicated, guiding the massive aircraft toward the runway with practiced ease. Captain Reynolds monitored silently, allowing his first officer to handle the landing. It was a vote of confidence that James didn't take lightly. Through the windshield, the familiar skyline of New York came into view, the city where he'd first built his company, where he'd met and married Sophia, where everything had both begun and ended, and perhaps where something new might start. United 847, cleared to land on runway 4 right, came the controller's voice. Cleared to land, runway 4 right, United 847, James confirmed, focusing intently on the approach. The wheels touched down with barely a bump, the aircraft settling onto the runway in what pilots called a greaser, a perfect landing. James felt a surge of satisfaction as he guided the plane to their assigned gate. Captain Reynolds nodded approvingly. Couldn't have done better myself, Cooper. Coming from the veteran pilot, it was high praise indeed. As passengers disembarked, Sophia found herself lingering in the cabin, delaying the moment when she'd need to make a decision about James's dinner invitation. Blake and Aisha had already left, eager to begin their 24-hour layover in New York. Only Captain Reynolds remained, completing paperwork in the cockpit with James. When they emerged, Reynolds nodded to Sophia. "Good work handling the diversion, Martinez. Not every crew could manage that group of passengers so smoothly." "Thank you, Captain," she replied, gathering her belongings. Reynolds glanced between her and James, then smiled knowingly. "I'll see you both tomorrow. Or not. Crew scheduling is always changing things." With that cryptic remark, he departed, leaving them alone in the empty aircraft. James approached slowly. "So, about that dinner?" Sophia hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning since her conversation with Harrington. "Did you really become a pilot because of me?" James looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Not because of you," he clarified. "Because of us. Because our marriage taught me that success means nothing if you're not doing what truly matters." He smiled slightly. "You always said I'd never follow through on flying commercially, that it was just another distraction from what was important." "I remember," she acknowledged quietly. "You were right about so many things, Sophia. But not about that." He gestured around the cockpit. "This isn't a distraction or a hobby. This is who I always was, who I should have been all along. Why didn't you tell me? When you were considering it?" "I tried," he said softly. "That last night I wanted to tell you about the offer from Harrington, about the pilot training clause I'd negotiated, but you'd already decided to leave." His expression held no accusation, just sad acceptance. "And you had every right to. I'd given you no reason to believe I'd change." Sophia felt a lump forming in her throat. 5 years of certainty about their past was unraveling before her eyes. "We should go," she said finally. "It's getting late." James nodded, disappointment evident in his eyes. "Of course." As they walked through the terminal together, maintaining a professional distance, Sophia found herself at a crossroads. Ahead lay the familiar path, the life she'd carefully built without him. Behind lay all their shared history, mistakes and joy alike. And beside her walked the man who had once been her everything, now a stranger and yet somehow more familiar than ever. At the terminal exit, they would go their separate ways, her apartment in Brooklyn, his place, wherever that was now. They reached the doors. "It was good seeing you, Sophia," James said, resignation in his voice. "Really good." She looked up at him, at the face she'd once known better than her own, at the eyes that still looked at her with warmth despite everything. 5 years ago she'd walked away. Today she chose differently. "About that dinner," she said quietly. "I know a place in Brooklyn. Great Italian food." His expression transformed, hope replacing resignation. "Yeah? Yeah." She smiled tentatively. "It turns out 5 years is long enough to get some perspective." "And what perspective is that?" he asked, moving slightly closer. "That sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead exactly where you need to go," she replied, echoing his words from the flight. As they stepped out into the New York evening together, neither knew where this new journey might lead. But for the first time in 5 years, they were walking in the same direction, and for now, that was enough. 6 months later, "Ladies and gentlemen, This is your captain speaking. We're beginning our initial descent into San Francisco International Airport. Local time is 3:25 p.m. and weather is a beautiful 68 degrees with clear skies." Sophia smiled as James's voice came over the PA system. After 6 months, hearing him referred to as captain still gave her a surge of pride. His promotion had come through faster than anyone had expected, a testament to both his skills and the airline's need for experienced pilots. From her position in the premium cabin, Sophia glanced out the window at the familiar California coastline coming into view. So much had changed since that unexpected flight that had reunited them 6 months ago. "Someone's smiling," Blake observed, arranging glasses on the beverage cart. "Thinking about the captain again?" "I'm thinking about our 2 days off in San Francisco," Sophia corrected, though her blush gave her away. "Sure you are," Blake teased. "It's still weird, you know, my former roommate dating my boss." "He's not your boss," Sophia pointed out. "He's the pilot. Same difference. We all know who really runs this plane." Their playful banter was interrupted by a call from the cockpit. Sophia made her way forward, nodding to passengers as she passed through the cabin. Inside the cockpit, James sat at the controls, looking completely at home. His first officer, Linda Chen, was reviewing approach procedures. "You called?" Sophia asked professionally. James glanced up with a smile that still made her heart skip. "Just wanted to confirm dinner reservations for tonight. Still okay with 7:30? "Perfect," she replied. "Though you could have texted." "And miss seeing you?" "Never." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than strictly professional, but First Officer Chen diplomatically pretended not to notice. Their relationship was no secret among the crew, though they maintained strict professionalism during flights. After that first dinner in Brooklyn 6 months ago, which had stretched into a 5-hour conversation where they'd finally said all the things left unsaid for 5 years, they'd cautiously begun rebuilding what they'd once had. Only now, it was something different, something stronger. "I should get back," Sophia said, aware of Chen's presence. "See you on the ground, Captain." James nodded, his expression warm. "Looking forward to it," led Attendant Martinez. As the plane began its final approach to San Francisco, Sophia prepared the cabin for landing, her movements automatic after years of practice. Her mind, however, was on the evening ahead, and on the small velvet box hidden in James's luggage that she'd accidentally discovered while looking for his phone charger that morning. She hadn't mentioned finding it, of course. Some surprises were worth preserving. The Cliff House restaurant overlooked the Pacific Ocean, offering spectacular sunset views as they sat at a window table. James looked handsome in civilian clothes, dark jeans and a blue button-down that matched his eyes. "This feels familiar," he said, glancing around the restaurant. "Have we been here before?" Sophia nodded. "Our 3rd date. You flew us out to San Francisco for the weekend on your private plane. Very impressive for a tech CEO trying to woo a flight attendant." "I was showing off," he admitted with a grin. "Did it work?" "Considering I married you a year later, I'd say it was somewhat effective." Their wine arrived and James raised his glass. "To second chances." Sophia clinked her glass against his. "To second chances." As they enjoyed their meal, conversation flowed easily between them. Discussions of work, friends, books they'd read, places they planned to visit. There was an ease between them now that had been missing during their marriage, a comfortable rhythm that came from truly knowing and accepting each other. "I have something to ask you," James said as dessert arrived. "It's about our living situation." Sophia's heart quickened. They'd been dividing their time between his apartment in Manhattan and hers in Brooklyn, an arrangement that worked but was increasingly inconvenient. "I've been thinking," he continued, "maybe we should consider finding a place together, something that's ours, not yours or mine." She studied his face, noting the slight nervousness in his eyes. "Are you asking me to move in with you, Captain Cooper?" "I'm asking if you want to build something new with me," he clarified. "A life that combines who we were with who we've become." Sophia reached across the table to take his hand. "I'd like that, very much." Relief and happiness spread across his features. "Really, really," she confirmed. "Though I have one condition. Anything. We find a place near the airport. Those early morning commutes are killing me." He laughed, squeezing her hand. "Deal." As they finished dessert, James grew quieter, more thoughtful. Sophia recognized the signs. He was building up to something. "Walk on the beach," he suggested as they left the restaurant. The sun was setting over the Pacific as they strolled barefoot along the shore, waves lapping gently at their feet. In the distance, a plane took off from SFO, climbing into the golden sky. "Remember when we first met?" James asked, his fingers intertwined with hers. "Flight 822 to Chicago," she replied immediately. "You were in seat 3A and spilled coffee on your laptop during turbulence. And you saved my presentation with club soda and a hairdryer in the galley," he finished, smiling at the memory. "I was convinced it was fate. You asked for my number before we even landed. Best impulse decision I ever made." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, the wind carrying the scent of salt and promise. "Sophia," James said, stopping to face her as the waves rushed around their ankles. "These past 6 months have been extraordinary. Reconnecting with you, rebuilding what we had, it's shown me what really matters." She felt her breath catch as he reached into his pocket. "I'm not the same man I was 5 years ago," he continued, "and you're not the same woman. We've both grown, changed, discovered who we really are and what we truly want." He took a deep breath. "And what I want, more than anything, is a future with you." He dropped to one knee in the wet sand, pulling out the velvet box she'd glimpsed that morning. Inside was not the enormous diamond she'd once worn, but a simple platinum band inlaid with tiny blue stones the color of the sky. "Sophia Martinez, will you marry me?" Again? Despite having suspected this moment was coming, Sophia found herself overwhelmed with emotion. Their journey had been so unexpected, from love to loss to rediscovery. "We'll do it differently this time," James promised, still on one knee as waves washed around them. "No rushed decisions, no competing priorities, just us, building something real together." Sophia looked down at the man she'd once left behind, the man who had transformed his life and in doing so made space for her to return to it. The man who now put her first, who had proven that people really could change when it mattered most. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, I'll marry you again." James slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into a kiss that tasted of salt and wine and second chances. Above them, another plane traced its path across the darkening sky, a reminder of the journey that had brought them back together and the countless journeys that still lay ahead. 6 weeks later, Sophia stood in the cockpit doorway as passengers boarded their flight from New York to Paris. James was running through pre-flight checks, his captain's stripes gleaming on his shoulders. "All set for the honeymoon flight, Captain Cooper?" she asked. He looked up with a smile that still made her heart race. "Absolutely, Mrs. Cooper Martinez." Their small wedding ceremony the previous weekend had been everything their first wedding wasn't. Intimate, heartfelt and focused entirely on their commitment to each other rather than external appearances. And now, in a fitting tribute to their unique love story, they were working their honeymoon flight together, she as lead attendant, he as captain, before taking 2 weeks off to enjoy Paris as newlyweds. "Passengers are wondering why the lead attendant and captain have matching rings," she told him with a grin. "What did you tell them?" "That it's a long story involving unexpected turbulence and an unplanned diversion." James laughed, standing to draw her briefly into his arms. "The best kind of journey." "Captain Cooper," came the voice of First Officer Chen as she approached the cockpit. "We're ready for departure." James nodded professionally, though his eyes still held Sophia's. "Time to fly." As Sophia returned to the cabin to prepare for takeoff, she glanced at the simple band on her finger that matched the one James now wore. 5 years apart had taught them both what mattered. 6 months together had proven they could build something better than before, and now they had a lifetime to soar together. The plane lifted smoothly into the sky, leaving New York behind as it climbed into the endless blue. Below, the city where they'd found each other, lost each other, and found each other again grew smaller, just one chapter in their ongoing story. Ahead lay Paris, and beyond that, countless destinations yet to be discovered, both geographic and emotional. Their journey had taken unexpected turns, weathered storms, and required course corrections. But now, at last, they were flying together, and this time both knew exactly where they were heading. Forward, together, into clear skies. What did you think of the story? Share your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What was your score? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to follow all our stories and have fun.